King and Queen are very, very happy at Clarence House, which will always be a more comfortable place to live than Buckingham Palace, which has long not really been liked by members of the royal family as such.
Yes.
They've very much seen it as a flat above the office. In many ways. But this raises the question of perhaps using Buckingham Palace in different ways.
Now, the royal family has released new documents revealing details of its finances, quite a lot of detail, including a £370 million refurbishment of Buckingham Palace. Despite the extensive works, King Charles and Queen Camilla have said they don't plan to live in the palace. Instead, they'll continue using it as the administrative headquarters of the monarchy. Earlier, the former Liberal Democrat minister and author of Royal Mint National Debt told Times Radio Breakfast, this is Norman Baker, that he was astounded by the figures announced today.
It is absurd that on this so-called slimmed-down monarchy that Charles and William have been talking about, the costs go up and up. We don't get a slimmed-down cost, we get an expansive cost. The royal family is bloated and needs to go on a diet, and we're seeing the exact opposite with this announcement in the last 24 hours.
Craig Prescott is an expert in UK constitutional law and also is author of The Modern Monarch. Craig, good morning.
Good morning.
I think people listening may be surprised that the King and Queen have said, no, we're not going to live at Buckingham Palace.
Yes, I can imagine for many people it's surprising, and especially after so much money is being spent on renovating the palace. But I think that those renovations have been on very much the ceremonial sort of parts of the palace. Those gilded rooms that we see, and also all the services, the heating and electric and what have you. And the King and Queen are very, very happy at Clarence House, which will always be a more comfortable place to live than Buckingham Palace, which has long not really been liked by members of the royal family as such.
Yes.
They've very much seen it as a flat above the office. In many ways. But this raises the question of perhaps using Buckingham Palace in different ways. It could be open for longer and so generate more revenue, which is very much what today is about in some ways, and may also sort of create the opportunity to use the palaces perhaps for big international summits. If the G7 or NATO or something are in London, then, and in a way that might add to the soft power of monarchy, which is one of its big advantages.
Why hasn't that happened to date?
Why hasn't the palace been used in that way?
Well, exactly, as you say, G7 meeting or NATO meeting.
There's been, there have been moments. The Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting was partly held there once. But if it's a working palace and there's other things going on, that might be more difficult to sort of work out. But this perhaps creates an opportunity just to rethink what we use the palace for, and that might be a good thing.
Does it lose a bit of its allure, though? Because for the tourists coming around the world, the reason it's so exciting is that it is the home of the King and the Queen.
I do get that. It is, one of the sort of things that astounds people is that the monarchy is a living and breathing monarchy, and that the Buckingham Palace is, yes, that's where the King lives. If you go to the Tower of London when it's the state opening of Parliament, you don't see the crown jewels. Instead, you see a sign that says "in use," because they're at Westminster. So that there's, that is part of the magic of it, particularly for tourists. But all these things are sort of put in a pot and stirred together, and the monarchy sort of perhaps makes a judgment call. And I think on this, they've made a judgment call that perhaps it's better if the palace is more open to the public and perhaps is used in different ways.
What about this idea that they have made public now how much tax they've paid? It's definitely sort of improved transparency. What do you make of the decision and also the value that we learned as well?
So, This comes, I think, again, there are several reasons for this rather than any one sort of key thing. We increasingly expect senior public figures, such as the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, to disclose their tax returns. That's something that's happened over the past 15 years. The monarchy's traditional approach to these questions increasingly leapt out of kilter from perhaps the public expectations. But we've had increasing scrutiny over money and the monarchy in the wake of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And there was another point then, I've forgotten what it was. But the other point is that this revenue comes from the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall, which are sort of anomalous entities. They're not purely private and belong to the King and Prince William in their own right as such, but they're not sort of ordinary bits of the public sector either. And so I think sort of disclosing that, the tax that they pay on the revenue they get from the duchies, is a recognition that these are slightly odd bodies and they themselves have been subject to controversy in recent years.
Yeah, so much for us to discuss. Thank you so much for your time. That's Craig Prescott, expert in UK constitutional law, author of The Modern Monarchy. Lots of messages coming in. Steve says, for goodness sake, Buckingham Palace is known worldwide as a symbol of the monarchy in Great Britain. Do we really want to allow it to deteriorate and become a symbol of our nation's decline? Of course not. Steve, I think, is talking about that investment then into the restoration of the palace. Someone else also called Rosie messages in saying the palace is used all the time. Dinners, cocktail parties, investitures. Tourists only see the state rooms at the palace anyway.